Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thanks for joining me today for another one of Mr. Owen's Lectures! Alright, kiddos, I'm rocking black today in remembrance for the Holocaust. That's what we're covering today. This is a really sad part of history, but I gotta cover it, so let's get into it. In World War I wish the Holocaust was the only case of genocide that the world's ever seen, but it's not, fortunately. Genocide's awful. In World War I, there was a massive genocide of Armenian people within the Ottoman Empire. The world has largely forgotten about it, and Hitler imagined the same would be said for Jewish people within Europe. This, however, was not the case, as the Nazis' crimes against humanity were documented and shown to the world. These atrocities, led by Hitler, were known as the Holocaust. Genocide is the deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group. If you hear the term genocide, that's what it means. Okay? Hitler used people's fears from their struggles after World War I and during the Great Depression and blamed Jews for all of their problems. Yoda said it best. Yes, we're in the middle of the Holocaust and I'm quoting Yoda, but hear me out because this is super important. Yoda said, "Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering." You remember that scene from Star Wars? Okay, when Yoda says that, when Yoda says fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. That is exactly what happens here. Once Hitler is put in charge, he is able to use his people's fears and turn them into anger towards Jewish people. Okay, this will lead to great suffering for the Jewish people. Hitler and his secret police, called the Gestapo or SS, begin to round up Jewish people and put them in what are called concentration camps. Okay? They're able to grab Jewish people very easily because they were all registered at their local synagogues. Synagogue is a place of worship for Jewish people. Okay? And all these Jewish people are registered at their synagogues. So once the Nazis had each synagogue's list of members, then they could easily round up the Jewish people. Jews were taken without trial and put into prison-like facilities called concentration camps. There they were forced to do labor or executed. Some just worked themselves to death or starved. Others were killed in gas chambers, ovens, or firing squads. Eventually, towards the end of the war, the concentration camps were liberated by Allied troops. The Soviets were the first to discover concentration camps. Allied troops were shocked and appalled about what they discovered. Nazis sped up the killing process as the Allies moved in using gas. They also tried to hide evidence and cover up their crimes. Swift liberation of the camps preserved evidence and prevented Hitler from killing all of Europe's Jews. Allied troops found some concentration camps had been hastily destroyed, with some bodies left behind. The concentration camp that killed the most people and is arguably the most famous is called Auschwitz, and it's in Poland. And the Russians will discover that one. Many prisoners were liberated by Allied troops. However, and this is really sad, about half of those that were rescued died in the first week. The reason being is that if you haven't eaten in weeks, you can't just start eating normally again. It can kill you. Most of the Jewish people were so malnourished that their bodies just couldn't recover. Only 33%, or 1/3 of European Jews, survived the Holocaust. In other words, Hitler was able to kill 2/3 of Jews in Europe. All in all, 6 million people died in the Holocaust. While it was predominantly Jews that were killed, there were other groups that were persecuted and put in concentration camps, including disabled people, Jews, Poles, which were Polish people, communists, Soviet prisoners, homosexuals, and gypsies. These people were also all sent to concentration camps. After being set free, many Jewish people still faced anti-Semitism, which we talked about. That's hostility or prejudice towards Jewish people, and they feared returning to their homes. Many survivors also faced serious psychological struggles, including survivor's guilt and heightened stress responses. Imagine getting out of a death camp and then being faced with displacement, anti-Semitism, depression, and continued persecution. This created the idea of a Zionist state. This was an idea for Jewish people to return to their biblical homeland of Israel. After World War I, not II, after World War I, the British had taken control of Israel from the Ottoman Empire. After World War II, Israel was occupied by the Palestinians. The Allied forces felt bad for Jewish people, so they moved out the Palestinians and gave Jewish people the area that is known today as Israel. This has created a ton of conflict in the Middle East and led to terrorism in the region and around the world. There'll be more videos on that to come later, but that's where that whole thing starts in the Middle East of aggression towards the West. After World War II, the Allies wanted to hold the Nazis accountable. The Nuremberg trials were held to persecute those that had committed atrocities of the Holocaust, so the world could see the horrors, evidence of the cost of human life could be documented, and those that were found guilty of war crimes could be executed or imprisoned. It was called the Nuremberg trials because they were held in the city of Nuremberg in Germany. Hermann Göring is an example of someone that was put on trial and later executed. Throughout his trial, he just claimed he was following orders, which is crazy because it was really a controversial thing because they're like showing all this evidence and he's like, yeah, I did all this, but I was just following orders. So there's that level of like, you know, how accountable should we hold him? And they do end up executing him. Okay? But many Nazis escape persecution and they flee to South America. I'll be doing more lectures on that later. One famous escapee was Adolf Eichmann. Adolf Eichmann lived in Argentina until 1960. And in 1960, Israeli special forces are going to kidnap him in broad daylight and bring him back to Israel to stand trial. He was found guilty and executed. Even today, they are still finding Nazis that worked in concentration camps and were able to escape. So if you're thinking, Mr. Owen, this is stupid, this is a long time ago, they literally just found another Nazi in the United States a few years ago. So they're still finding these guys who escaped and came to the United States, came to South America. They were able to falsify passports or hide, whatever they had to do. When this happens, they try to deport them back to Germany and make them stand trial and hold them accountable. One of them was even caught on TV. Total fun fact for a second here. One of them was even caught on TV, and I'll show you the video in class. Live on camera, they brought down this famous anchor named Sam Darnoldson, and he's live on TV in South America, and he approaches this Nazi, and he's like, hey, are you so-and-so, the guy that killed all these guys in Italy in this concentration camp? And he's like, yeah. And they get into a heated argument and conversation, and he's like, it was war. I was doing what I was supposed to do. And Sam Darnoldson's like, dude, you were a monster. You were a murderer. And that guy ended up getting deported and having to face trial. So we'll go over that more later. But it was full-on covert sneaking Nazis out of Germany and having them hide all over the world. So it creates this whole thing of Nazi hunters and people trying to track them down. Shockingly, there are people that try to say that the Holocaust never happened. This is known as Holocaust denial. I can assure you that it did happen. Okay? It's supposed to make Jewish people seem untrustworthy and reduce sympathy. Holocaust denial propaganda is spread by groups like the Ku Klux Klan, known as the KKK. It's a white supremacist group. Neo-Nazi groups. Nazism is actually illegal in Germany, but it is not illegal in the United States. We have the right to your political opinion here. So there are neo-Nazi groups in the United States. Also right-wing political groups in Europe. And even some Middle Eastern nations like Iran have said that the Holocaust didn't happen. So super sad to think about. If you're interested in reading more about the Holocaust, I recommend Elie Wiesel. Elie Wiesel was a survivor of the Holocaust. He wrote 57 books, won numerous awards. One of his most famous books is called The Night. Very, very, very good writer. And another one is Anne Frank. And Anne Frank's diary is life-changing if you've never read it. I provided you with a link to the Anne Frank house, and you can actually take a virtual tour of her house. And it's pretty unbelievable to learn about her, and her writing is quite beautiful. Quick little story time I'll leave you with is I saw this documentary years and years ago when I was younger, and I'll never forget it. It was about a group of German POWs, prisoners of war. And they were living in the United States as prisoners, and they talked about how wonderful the facilities were. They said the U.S. really took care of us. They would give us each a beer every night. They would feed us like our home food. We got heaters. We had nice blankets. We had nice sheets. And we kept thinking, like, how bad could the Americans be if they're willing to treat their prisoners like this? And when the war ended, the United States did not let the prisoners out right away. In fact, it was several years before they let them out. And when they saw all the atrocities of the Holocaust, most of Germany did not realize what was happening. Okay? They knew the Jews were being taken away, but they didn't know that they were being taken away and like brutally murdered. And the United States showed them a video, these POWs, of what had happened. And I'll never forget this documentary as long as I live, because this German officer was crying. And he said, I thought they were making it up. I thought it was propaganda. I thought they were trying to brainwash us. I couldn't believe that we would do something so horrible. And he's just weeping. And he's like, to find out that that really happened. And so it took the United States some time before they let prisoners out to like, hey guys, this happened. So Germany, like I said, a lot of Germans didn't know what happened. I also had the amazing opportunity. I went on the USS Midway, which is a museum here in San Diego. I highly recommend going and checking it out. One of the days I was there, there was a guy in a booth, and he was a World War II veteran, old man. And he was a POW in Germany. He was a prisoner of war by the Germans. And I talked to this guy for like an hour about his experiences. And he had similar experiences to the ones I saw in the documentary that were Germans living in the United States. He said they treated him pretty well. He explained how he got captured and all this kind of stuff. But it was really an amazing opportunity to talk to a World War II veteran. But that is the Holocaust, guys. I know it's really, really, really sad. So I am sorry. But it did happen. And it's important that you know it happened, because if we don't know it happened and we don't talk about it, then history has a tendency to repeat itself. And there have been genocides in modern history. We even talked about one in the Congo, which was against the Hutus and Tutsis. We talked about that. And that was just in the 1990s. And there were others since then. So there's been a lot of genocides, which is really sad to think about. Today, there's no League of Nations. It's called the United Nations, and it's much more powerful. And they try to prevent things like that from happening. So that's at least the silver lining. But I can assure you that the Holocaust happened, and a lot of people lost their lives. I hope you learned something from this and appreciate the beautiful place and security that we have in this country. You guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks for watching.